Welcome to the strange and mysterious world with William and Lee.
All right, and welcome to season 3, episode 14, Strange and Mysterious World. Tonight we're going to be chatting about mushrooms. Not the regular Denny mushrooms, but the healing mushrooms and some of their effects. We're going to be chatting to Anthony Townsend. He's a PhD clinical psychologist in private practice. He has trained in psychology at several universities in South Africa and has also trained at Nuffield Department of Neuroscience at Oxford University. He is a lecturer and postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Pretoria with a focus on psychedelic assistance therapy in South Africa. Anthony is also a collaborating researcher with the Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research at the Johns Hopkins University and is a clinical fellow of the International Neuropsychoanalysis Society. He is currently serving as the vice chair of SRPSA and the SSA Clinical Psychology Society EXCO, leading a special project on psychedelic assistant therapy. So quite a long list of acknowledgements there for Anthony. So yeah, interesting topic, dude. We were chatting about this the LSD section of it not too long ago. So yeah, it's going to be quite interesting to hear what Anthony has to say with regards to the mushrooms and where it kind of fits into society and why it's been kind of deemed as, like, I know it's illegal in a lot of places, but
It's illegal here in South Africa.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. A lot of places, a lot of countries, but should it really be? I think it should be legalized, but it should be managed. You know what I mean? It should be
So I mean,
managed.
I just finished doing a whole documentary on it, and also the legalization thing, and like two people that are like, what do you call it? Psilocybin mushroom facilitators that help people through these journeys for these healing experiences, and they've got these huge court cases over their heads, and they keep on going to trial and it gets postponed, and they've even applied to. There's a whole movement here in South Africa now that's applying to get it legalized, and it was only illegal because of the American with the ban on all drugs. They just put it into the Schedule 1 drug, and then the rest of the world just kind of followed suit. But when the Bushmen and other earlier people were using these things for like medicinal purposes, and now it's illegal. So I've done a whole documentary on it. Townsend, Anthony was one of the psychologists and kind of more the science kind of side to it that I interviewed. So it was just very interesting hearing his side of the story. And I mean, from a scientific and kind of therapeutic, or what's called psychology kind of side to it. And yes, and anyway, so these documentaries, I know we've been discussing them quite a lot on the show, and we've been having guests on that I've been interviewing the documentary. So finally, it's going to be coming out on my website. I've just made a website that the documentaries aren't up yet, but if people want to go there now and just start subscribing to the newsletter, and I can alert everybody when the documentaries come out. There's 6 at the moment, and it ranges from everything from psilocybin mushroom, past life regression therapy, the mermaids of South Africa,
UFOs
sightings, UFOs in South Africa.
Now, what's the cost, Will? So if somebody wants to sign up, so first of all, where do they go, and what's the price for?
Well, the link will be below. It's called elusistv.com, like the Lucini Mysteries, like the place in
Elysium.
Elysium, where people go for, not Elysium like that movie where the people went to the spaceship. The rich people go to the spaceship, and the poor people on Earth. But it's Elysium was the place where all the like philosophers and people of the ancient and antiquity went to go get initiated into the mysteries in Greece.
Okay. And the price?
Well, that's the thing. You can just sign up for the newsletter at the moment, and then once
Mhm.
every documentary comes available on the website, there's a lot of information about the documentaries that are up there now, but the actual documentaries aren't up there, and I'm going to be releasing the trailers soon. So even if it says trailer there, if you click it, it won't go to a trailer as yet. But you sign up for the newsletter, and once the documentaries come available, you can pay $5 to rent them. Well, each documentary will be $5 to rent. I mean, because
Okay.
these documentaries cost a hell of a lot of money to make. I mean,
Yeah,
geez.
100%. But would you not
So,
consider maybe doing like a monthly subscription, so or like a yearly subscription? So, say for example, uh, if you're bringing out four documentaries in the month, and instead of paying, I don't know, $20 for the month, you can pay, I don't know,
yeah,
$200 for
sure.
the
Like
year. You save two
like a
months or something like
Netflix
that.
subscription or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah,
thing is, I mean, I've only made six now, and it took
yeah.
5 years to make these six. So, like,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I would love to give it away for free, but I mean, I have to. I mean, I spend so much money, and I got so many people investors, and I got to pay. And it took 5 years of my life, so that's. But there's only six documentaries, so if I give a monthly subscription or whatever, the people just watch that in like one,
Yeah,
you
okay,
know.
okay, okay.
But I wanted to go that way. So eventually, if I get,
But can you not bring somebody else on board? So, say for example, you've got your six. Can you not bring somebody else that's got something similar to what we've been doing, and you kind of amalgamate that with what you've got, and then you can kind of have constant content,
yeah,
kind of
sure.
running,
I
so
mean, I would
almost like
love to.
Gaia TV, almost like
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go something like that, but I'm just starting off like now with these six.
okay, okay, cool. We'll
My
promote it on our show. How's that?
yeah.
Yeah, like, cool.
So yeah, cool.
Right. Well, anyway, here's Anthony. Let's get him on and see what he has to say.
Hey, Anthony,
Well, how's it going?
Hey,
good
Anthony,
man.
how are
How's
you?
it going?
Good, thank you. Lise, how's it going, man? Oh, Lee, not
Lee,
Lise.
yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. So this is Lee, Anthony, Anthony. Good to
That's,
see you again, man.
Great to see you and a pleasure to meet you, Lee.
yeah, pleasure to meet you too, man. I was just reading your book of a bio out
Ah,
earlier. That's actually quite
apologies.
impressive. It's like very impressive. But obviously, the stuff that we're quite interested in is the the mushrooms.
Of course, they're far more interesting than I am, so I wouldn't blame you there.
Yeah. So look, we had
Don't
a
put yourself down, Anthony. You told me some crazy stories, and you're a very, very interesting person.
we had a podcast not last week, the week before. We were chatting a little bit about LSD. So yeah, we're quite interested to hear kind of similarities, where it's going. I know you want to use I know that the guys are wanting to use it in the medical. It's actually very beneficial for the medical side, but which kind of seems to go over the heads of the people that are up in the up at the top. So yeah, so tell us, man, how did you get into all of this? How did you start with this whole thing?
You know, the funny thing is that it's such a fascinating and rich field, and 90% of people who enter into it have these remarkable stories of personal transformation and incredible enlightenment that they've had through their own experience. And mine, unfortunately, was incredibly dry and scientific in that sense. When I was really, really fortunate and I was spending some time overseas in the UK studying at Oxford, a lot of people started raving at the time about these amazing and remarkable results that were being shown using psychedelics to treat depression. And typically, whenever you're studying any kind of intervention to see how well it's going to help people, if you get an effect size of something between 33 to 46% of people, like just under half, you think you've got something really profound and remarkable in the world of psychology and psychiatry. And what we were hearing from these trials is up to 86% of people were getting better from depression by using mushrooms.
Huh.
And this sounded like sci-fi to us. There was no way. So honestly speaking, it was actually the data that got me fascinated in this area. Because anytime as a clinician, if you hear something's helping people and is actually useful, this is what gets your gears going. And I started doing way more research. And as I started to learn more and more and more, saw how effective it was, then I felt compelled to go have my own experiences, which I then did find really transformative and incredibly profound. And then because of these, these two things combined, the real powerful research side, my own personal experience, I felt there's definitely a place to actually start using this to try and help people, which is kind of what I've been doing for the last few years.
Okay, that's awesome. And then kind of, so what is the difference between your LSD? I'm assuming it all fits under the psychedelic kind of realm, mushrooms, LSD, and all that kind of stuff. So what is the difference then? So if you said to me, all right, if you took LSD, this is kind of the vibe you'd be going on. If you took a mushroom, this is the kind of vibe that you'd be going on. So what's it? Because I know Will said something the other day about mushrooms versus LSD. So I just want to hear what your input is.
That's a very, very interesting question. So, I mean, you've got like a couple layers, right? They're all molecules that have similarities and have differences. So the big layer that we use in like medical and psychiatric and neuroscientific circles is that if this molecule will show you your deeper self, if it'll show you your unconscious mind, we class it as psychedelic because we say it's mind manifesting. So that includes mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, San Pedro, or mescaline. And it even goes as wide as things like MDMA and ketamine. So it's like a really broad banner. Within that, you get substructures. So within that, you get what we call your classic psychedelics. And that's where it narrows a little bit. These are ones that have that effect by activating large doses of serotonin in your system. And that would include mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca, and mescaline. And then amongst those four, even though they're all really similar because they push up high doses of serotonin in your brain, giving you that kind of strong immersive effect, they all have little nuances. Like one of them, mescaline or San Pedro, the cactus, is molecularly much closer to MDMA. And so it also has this really strong empathogenic effect, making you feel deep compassion for yourself and for other people. LSD's unique contribution is as much as it upstream in your brain causes a big catalyzation of serotonin activity, making you feel a whole wide range of things. It downregulates depression and anxiety. It makes you feel a sense of awe. It can hyperactivate your sensory channels, often making you able to see sounds and taste colors and do all fascinating things. As much as it upregulates this, a little bit further downstream, it pushes up a chemical called dopamine. And that's kind of your excitatory seeking nervous system molecule. And LSD is much stronger on the dopamine front. And for this reason, not only can it help you get all of these profound realizations for yourself, it's also why it's the more popular of the sort of party drugs in this regard, because it actually starts to make you really excited and intrigued by stimuli around you in ways that other psychedelics don't do as much.
Okay, and mushrooms?
So mushrooms is kind of the purest of them all in the sense that it focuses almost exclusively on serotonin. And that's not to limit it. Philip Stahl, who's like one of the big fundies of psychopharmacology, he has a funny way of describing serotonin. He says it's the one neurotransmitter to rule them all. Because if you change something in the neurotransmitter of serotonin, you change everything in the brain. It's what we call a tryptamine or a ligand. It modulates all other brain chemistry. So mushrooms aren't as strong on the dopamine front. So you are allowed, when you have mushrooms, to go much more internal and to have a softer introspective journey. Whereas LSD, if you give somebody lots of stimulus, they'll struggle to do that. They can actually still remain very excited and engaged with the outside world because of that added value that it creates in that direction.
Well, and DMT, where does DMT fit into this?
That's a brilliant question. And DMT, intriguingly, is sort of like the nucleus of the whole situation. So whenever somebody has an experience of transcendence or awe or oneness with the universe, that's due to dimethyltryptamine or DMT. All of the psychedelics have these cool effects, but all of them at some point will trigger DMT release in the brain. So DMT is actually a separate molecule that happens as a result or a consequence of all of these further down, but it's the one that fundamentally everybody is chasing because that's what actually gives you the transcendent or peak experience that we all describe.
Oh, well, because I've just been reading Rick Strassman's DMT molecule. I mean, it's so fascinating. I mean, like I'm halfway through. It's such an amazing book, and but now you're saying that I'm just like, well, why doesn't everybody just go and smoke the DMT and just not take the mushrooms?
It's actually it's a good question. And I mean, I also wondered that for a little while because I mean, like one of the options, as you say, is some people will just ingest 5-MeO DMT. The more common choice is they'll just get normal DMT, like through Changa, where they could just smoke DMT. And why is that not the way to go? Well, there's a reason why psychedelics seem to have gained more traction. So I'm sure you've seen in the book, and one of the more fascinating things in the research around psychedelics is that if you smoke pure DMT, instead of getting to explore your own unconscious, it appears that you go into like an altered state of consciousness that feels remarkably like you've gone to like another dimension. And very often these experiences are characterized by like entities. You know, everyone always calls them the DMT elves that no one has obviously been able to make sense of just yet. It's one of the really, really intriguing things. You know, some people will say, okay, that's a feature of our collective unconscious. Other will say, no, those are actual entities you're encountering. You just don't know how to make sense of it. Naturally, the limitations of science are such that, hey, we don't know. We've got a whole bunch of hypotheses, but we're not sure yet. If you smoke DMT proper, you seem to have such a powerful experience that instead of focusing on your own internal consciousness and your own mind, you seem to go so deep that there's no room for personal reflection, but rather an experience of a transcendent experience that actually feels almost outside of your mind. So there's no personal symbolism attached to it. And so for that reason, a lot of people go with the psychedelic because the DMT happens towards the end. It doesn't overwhelm the experience, but you get a window catalyzed by these other chemicals that allows you to better get to know yourself in a way that DMT won't actually allow for.
Yes, because also that's in the book. Because DMT is like very quick active. It's only lasts for like 8 to 12 minutes, but it's
Mm.
like so. Well, this was in the book. It's saying so intensive. Like Rick Strassman is like his first patient that because he was taking people that had already had psychedelic experiences, so that they knew what they were in for. And like the one guy that had many mushroom trips or whatever, and LSD things, he took it and he was like, "Whoa, that was so intense," but it was too short to do any. It's too short to do any work on myself. Like I couldn't do it because it was like I was there, it was intense, and then I was out. But then later on in the book, he would do like four sessions with the tolerance dose. He would do like four sessions to like one patient in a day. Like he would send that intense, like the peak dose, because he worked out like if it was higher than that, the people would just like blank out and wouldn't know what happened,
Mm.
and then or if it would be too insane, and then he found this middle ground where they would go to the entities or they'd go to the weird spaces where they see it, and he would give people four doses in one day, and then that's when they like this one girl was so profoundly changed in her life. I mean, all of this trauma from her past was resolved, and there was quite a few cases like that. The one that really stuck out, and but then also what was quite scary. I mean, you hear like even on Joe Rogan's podcast and other podcasts, where people say like they took two of those, they because like they get the breakthrough level where they've smoked enough to get through to this other realm, and they said they did it like twice in one day, and then they were like they were in like psychosis for like weeks, you know, like, and then they couldn't come out of this psychosis. And I'm thinking, geez, but Rick Strassman is like he's just giving it to like people four times in one day, and I haven't heard the bad. He hasn't got to the bad side effects yet. I haven't got to that part of the book, but anyway, so I've gone on a whole rant here. But so what are the
The
scary
negatives.
side?
Yeah.
So it's actually exactly what you said. It's not a rant in the slightest because that's actually very much the whole phenomenology of it. Like that's what it feels like and you get to experience. The difficulty, as you can imagine, from like a therapeutic or a medical lens, is that the reason we're so cautious about DMT is because number one, it's going to be such an overpowering experience, and you're going to go to realms that aren't necessarily based on personal intention, that it's really difficult for us to curate it in such a way where we know you'll definitely get therapeutic value of it. You know, it's very much like rolling the dice. And you'll typically find that therapists and psychiatrists are very conservative in that regard. We're like, listen, I don't want to play Russian roulette with your mind. That's kind of unthoughtful of me. You know, I'm not being empathic to you. So exactly as you say, like this person could come out from such an overwhelming experience, and you can have like persistent hallucinatory experiences. You can have persistent reality contact issues. Because I mean, when you hear what people experience, I mean, especially with something like DMT, you definitely feel like that is realer than reality, which can be unbelievably jarring for anybody, because it really is that rich and colorful and vibrant and visceral. And again, like we said, we don't really know how to make sense of it yet. Whereas if you look at something like mushrooms, it's incredibly gentle, it's very soft, it takes a long time, and it's not so overpowering that another narrative will enter in. So we can kind of curate that space. We can kind of make sure that it's going to feel safe and meaningful, and it's going to give us a lot of room to work with where your mind can kind of fill in the blanks more than is offered in DMT, which you'll feel safe. And because it's not like this big shock to your system, very often you'll find that those negative effects that people can have afterwards feel much, much more limited. There's a lot more reality grounding that you can have. And you'll see that when you look at something like mushrooms or LSD, is that yes, you lose contact with reality, but unlike pure DMT, you don't feel like you're so far gone from it that you're in another reality. It's kind of like we've just blurred the boundaries enough. And that's way more tolerable for people with far fewer side effects after the experience.
Sure, and also because it's also you coming up like slowly, so you can kind of get used to the stages. With DMT, it's like they say in like 30 seconds you're in it. You're just like boom, and then you're like, must be quite intense, yeah.
Would that not lead credence to the theory that we are living in a hologram, in a
So
holographic universe? So
a
they're
lot
saying
of people
this
would
is
say,
not the
yeah.
reality, this or that we're living.
The thing is, it could. I mean, that's the kind of complication we're left with, especially with psychedelics, which is also what makes it kind of intriguing and enjoyable for anyone in a scientific lens. Because if you're being truly scientific, your favorite phrase in the world is, I don't know. Because we don't. Like science, we're trying to say, look, we're going to try and get really, really credible triangulated data to get as much conviction as we can about certain things. So when it comes to psychedelics and it takes us to a place like this, scientifically, we have no more evidence to say that's a hallucination of your mind than we do to say, actually, that is evidence that we're in a hologram. Actually, that is evidence that you've gone through a wormhole into another dimension. So the scientist kind of throws up their shoulders and goes, I don't know, but that could be the case. Sure. Like that's a possibility.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of the guys that we've interviewed over the past few years, we've been doing this now. Um, we we kind of delve into quite a lot of different other realms, gurus, those kind of things. And we've kind of come to understand that we've got this physical body, we've got an ethereal body, we've got a whole lot of causic bodies and all those kind of things. And these things are able to move around and live on different planes at different times. So it kind of almost leads a credence to saying if, and this is just a theory, you've taken your DMT, you've shot off into this other realm, you have gone into the realm, but it's not you physically, it's your etheric body.
Mm.
Because we've got the different body. And I know the Egyptians believed in this kind of stuff as well, because they said that your bar leaves, the car leaves, and your car goes to the underworld, your bar goes elsewhere. I mean, this is like an ancient thing that's been with us for so many moons.
Mm.
But I mean, possible, like you said, we don't know, but it's possible that we've got one of our bodies that kind of almost takes the consciousness, because now I know a lot of us, when we're dreaming, we're unconscious. We don't remember half our dreams. But this now is almost like an astral projection, because your consciousness has stayed with the ethereal body, which is kind of what out of body experience is. And you've now moved into this other realm. You're experiencing that realm in your astral form, and you're now back again after what you said, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. So I mean, look, we don't know. It's just a possibility that this could be it. And I think it's actually very fascinating as to, what these things can do. But this then leads me to the question, why? Look, none of these things are addictive. I've had a few of these things, and I don't have a need that I need to take it every week or every day or whatever.
Mm.
It's like once a year, once every 6 months, whatever. It's okay. So it's not like it's an addictive thing. I might be wrong, but none of the stuff that I've heard about, like mushrooms, it doesn't sound like it's an addictive substance. Am I right on that? It's not addictive.
You are correct. The cool thing is when we've studied this quite intensively, actually, because a lot of the psychologists and psychiatrists who became interested in psychedelics were all people who were dealing with issues of substance abuse. And what you'll find is that psychedelic molecules are amongst the most well-tolerated and least addictive substances on the planet. So obviously, everything's got an addictive potential. But if you compare it to other drugs and substances, they're absolutely, they're on the low end of harm, and that they're a low end of addiction. And I mean, one of the funny, like easy tests you can say is that, like, how many times has somebody ever just finished a 12-hour LSD trip, and then at the end of it, you said, "Hey, can I give you some more?" And they said, "Yeah, I'd really love that." That has not really ever happened,
Yeah.
to be honest. Everybody who's been on the tail end of it is like, "Thank goodness this is over.
Yeah.
I'll definitely wait a little while," right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they are really, really safe and non-addictive in those senses.
I mean, I was in rehab for 2 months, and there was no one in there for mushrooms. And then two sets of people rolled in over that, and like there was like, I think if you said you were addicted to mushrooms, you would just be like laugh at you, like, "Ah, get out." I mean, we gave the guys that were addicted to dope like kind of a hard time. We're like, "Oh, you guys are just like babies." I mean, I'm sorry, that's like really like judgmental, but they use it to cure the addictions?
This is the great irony of it. It's exactly that. And I mean, to your point, well, I've also, in all the years that I worked in rehabs, which was like 7 years, I never ever came across a patient who was addicted to psychedelics. That was never the issue for them. Like you said, it was other substances. But very much to your point, we have found that psychedelics, far from being addictive, are some of the most potent and effective means by which you can treat addiction. And it's got a lot to do with the emotional motivation with which you approach a substance. So when you look at something like addiction or dependency or abuse, predominantly what's happening for a person in that regard is that they're experiencing a sense of emotional suffering that they want to mute or get rid of or run away from or escape or avoid. Like, I feel terrible and I want to run away from that feeling. And so that's often what we use a substance for, is like, if someone is drinking and it's like substance abuse, they're not feeling great and then want to feel better. It's like, I feel terrible and I want to get away from this feeling. I want to use the substance as a mechanism of avoidance. In psychedelics, they don't really work that way. If you ingest a psychedelic, it's not helping you avoid your stuff. It's going to bring your stuff straight to you. And that's why they have such a powerful effect, is that rather than helping us mask our deeper needs and emotions, psychedelics unveil them, help us safely confront them, make sense of them. And then instead of us running further and further away from our issues, we actually start to make friends with our inner demons. And then we're in a position to start transformation. One of the coolest things that we're learning about, and it's actually interesting because it should be a bigger deal than it is that in South Africa, we have a homegrown psychedelic called iboga. It's often synthesized into ibogaine. And it's starting to get a lot more research attention. I personally find this molecule to be unbelievably intriguing because it's got a unique potential for treating addiction, because it does all the things that other psychedelics do, but it also acts on what are called your muscarinic and your opioid receptors in your brain, which are heavily involved in addiction. So basically what it ends up doing is you ingest iboga, and what it will do is it will reset your homeostasis. It will reset your brain's levels to back what they were roughly before you got addicted to a substance. And that's huge because it takes away cravings and withdrawals and all of these things. It will literally retransform your brain. And so not only do they have this powerful emotional effect that's very different from other substances, but they also have like this massive healing property that can actually really stymie addiction, and it makes them beautiful. They're really wonderful medicines, and therefore not dangerous, but exactly the kind of cure to these sorts of ills.
Yes, well, because I saw that. Yeah, it's a huge thing for heroin addiction now. Like people are like going to Mexico, and they do the ibogaine, or what's it called, ibogaine, and they actually pair it with the DMT from the frog. That, like, because there's two types of DMT. There's the one that just sends you into like those different spaces, and then that other one, what is it, IMZO, DMT, and that one apparently
DMT.
people say that sends you to God, or to the operating system of the universe. Like it's beyond the normal DMT. So they pair it with that. I don't know if when they say pair it, do they mean like you on the ibogaine and now you're smoking the DMT, or you do it afterwards? I don't know. Because that sounds a
Listen,
bit.
to begin with, if that molecule takes you straight to God or the operating system, sign me up. Like, tell me where these retreats are. That sounds amazing. I would definitely want to experience that. But I wouldn't know. I'm not familiar with those retreats. Here we just use iboga. So I'd be really curious to see. You're right. It could mean they do it simultaneously, but my instinct tells me that they more likely will give you iboga, and then after that they'll probably do something like 5-MeO DMT. Because the problem with those kinds of treatments, especially if you're using like that kind of DMT with iboga, is it can be very hard on your heart. So
Yeah.
that's why we don't normally combine these things. So my instinct is they do it separately, but man, it's I think you said it's Mexico, so like, hey, anything probably goes, to be honest.
But no, because but they're quite. There's clinics in Mexico are like you spend like 200,000 rand to go to them. It's like, but
Oh,
it's proper because they've got a whole medical team to monitor everything that's going on in you when you're doing it. But there's one in Magaliesberg now, the Magaliesberg retreat, because I actually wanted to do that. See, because I'm an ex-addict, or what do you call it, a recovering alcoholic. I'm always looking for like it's like I'm like some kind of dodgy lawyer looking for like the clause like okay, no, but you can take this drug or you can take that drug, but you know so like so then I heard about the Magaliesberg thing, and they do a burger, and then it's like a whole week thing. You go there. I think it's like 40 grand or something. You go there, you do the burger. You have to go for a heart test before you go. You go there. They've got nurses and a medical team to help you through it because it's like 20 something hours that you under this thing for. And then they do a mushroom trip like on day 3, and then you smoke some what's it, changa on day whatever. But I mean, like they say, that's the ultimate. And I mean, since I've been clean and sober, I've been just wanting to look for like somewhere where I can just completely escape and reset everything to ground zero. So I've been looking into that and going like, wow, this is something I really want to try. I mean, and obviously the results are just unbelievable. It's also funny because they said that you usually should do 3 iboga things one after the other, but in the Magaliesberg they only do 1 because they say that no, she has this theory that the 3's too much, but the ones in Mexico are like, no, you got to do 3. I don't know, so I don't know, but it sounds a really, really it's like the new thing at the moment.
I can believe it, because we are seeing that it's a very unique molecule, and it seems to have massive healing potential for people. But just that subject you raise, right? Because as you say, usually when we go through treatments for addiction, you get into this place where like, okay, cool, all drugs are bad under all circumstances, right? Which, as you can imagine, is not like a terrible starting philosophy. One of the interesting bits of history around psychedelics was that Bill W., one of the founders of AA, was actually one of the biggest proponents of psychedelics and LSD that there were, because he was familiar with the research of showing how much good it was doing for people who struggled with addiction.
Wow, because actually that's what I wanted to ask you because I heard that rumor. I think it was in what's that guy that did it's Change Your Mind on Netflix?
Oh,
It's
Michael Pollan.
Marco Polo, and he said that, and I was always like, hey. But I mean, if he said it, I mean, he's probably done. He's a proper journalist. He's done his research. But I was always like, did AA really start on mushrooms? Because I heard they started on that. Then the war on drugs came in, and they were like, oh, Bill was like, and I've read that AA book like a few times, and like it's like it doesn't say anything about mushrooms there. But then apparently it got banned, the mushrooms, and Bill's like, oh God, what do we do now? And then he's like, okay, well, we'll just start this 12-step program. It's like
You
for
summarize the history pretty well. That's pretty much how it went down. And you're right. Michael Pollan is a very diligent journalist. It is pretty much true because we've got a lot of different accounts saying the same thing. But it's also presented a challenge for a lot of people, because they've made such incredible progress on their journey into sobriety. And sometimes, in that journey, you go through stumbling blocks and you get depressed and you get anxious. And I've had a lot of people who have been then getting stuck and they haven't relapsed, but like they're really suffering in a way, and their conventional medications aren't working or the conventional therapies aren't working. And they'll come and see me and we'll talk about it, and they'll raise it. They're like, people have been suggesting maybe I want to try psychedelics. Do you think this could work for me? And their biggest gripe is they're like, won't this be a relapse? And that's kind of where we go back to the understanding of it, where I'm like, It depends on what you're going to do this for. Are you doing this because you want to run away from your problems? Because then, yes, then it'll be a relapse. Or are you doing this because you want to resolve something in yourself? And it's been really cool to see how many people go through that. And I said, we'll treat it with caution, we'll treat it with care, we'll be super careful, we're going to watch closely for you, we'll look after you in this whole process, me, your supports, etc. And let's see how it's go. I have not seen one person who previously struggled with addiction, who's gone through psychedelic treatment, relapse in any way as a result of it. I've never seen it.
It's so, and because I'm going through the same thing, like, because I've been like sober, clean for 9 years, and I mean, sometimes I go through some intense like things where, I mean, like financially, like things in my life falling apart, whatever, you know, normal life things. We all go through that stuff. But gee, sometimes I'm just like, it's either I'm going to take myself out or I'm going to go to Shelley or Anthony and relapse on these mushrooms. I'm always trying to weigh it up. Like, am I relapsing or not relapsing? Or do I just want to go trip balls and have fun? Like, I'm just trying to like, but sometimes I'm in such a state. I'm just like, that's it. I'm calling Shelley or Anthony now. Cause sorry, we'll get to, you know, cause yours is a bit more pricey than cause Shelley's like the backyard, you know, like, it's illegal in South Africa, so it's like, do you go to the professional? Because you have to take your clients to not Mexico, to America. Or no, where do you take to Jamaica?
To Jamaica, yeah.
Jamaica. You take them to Jamaica to do the trip there, and then come back, and then you do your therapy stuff. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't afford the Jamaica, so I'll just go to the backyard thing where they do the illegal like abortions next door and the mushrooms on the other corner there. I'll go there and get it done there. But anyway, sorry, Lee, I'll let you have a question now. But the other thing I wanted to get into, which was interesting when I was doing the documentary, was that I was interviewing like a lot of these people for the documentary, and they're having like profound, beautiful experiences or whatever, and then they were becoming like huge advocates for it, or what is that word where people like angelists? What is it?
Evangelists.
Evangelists. They become evangelists, but then like 8 months, a year, because I did the documentary for, like, it's been quite a 2 years or so now, and like they such evangelists with it, and then like down the line, something, you know, like their life, it doesn't seem like it's actually worked out how they portraying, like their whole life. And I was getting like really worried, and I was thinking, Jesus, am I making the documentary? Because I was like what is the word
Evangelist.
again? Evangelist, and I hadn't even taken the bloody mushrooms, and I'm like, now I'm making a documentary about it because I think it's the next biggest thing, and I'm like starting to get a bit discouraged by these people I'm interviewing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is this really as good as it seems? But then obviously, when I spoke to you and like some other professionals, and then I was like, I was off the fence, and I was like, okay, no, actually, this is a miracle thing, and you were showing me data, and we were talking about the data, and then I was like, okay, no, it actually is what it is, and it got me all excited again. And I'm actually kind of glad that I didn't do the mushrooms while I was making the documentary, because if I had a great trip, I would have just made it amazing, the documentary, and said it's the greatest stuff ever, and I would have left the bad stuff out. And if I did a mushroom trip and it was terrible and bad, I would have just said it was a bad thing and don't anybody ever go there. So I'm actually glad I was biased, and when a documentary now is finished, it shows bad and good. Have I sent you a copy of it, Anthony?
I would love to see it, please.
Okay, I'll send you one after we finish here. And then, so then you explained to me why these people go back to their old behaviors and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, so if you can explain like what happens in the brain when you take this, and then just scientifically, and then why, 8 months later, you could be back to where you were before you even started.
With great pleasure. And I mean, you're right. This for me was a big part of also what settled my internal debate around it. The greatest mistake we can all make is to become evangelists and to think that psychedelics are a silver bullet, that they're this cure-all panacea that fixes everyone for everything, and simply by ingesting it, all will be resolved. That would simply not be true. When you look at a psychedelic, there are two principal functions to what a psychedelic does. Function number one is that after you ingest the psychedelic, it will unveil your unconscious mind to you. So the whole value of ingesting a psychedelic is that in normal everyday life, Your frontal lobe is active and it's kind of repressing a lot of your feelings, a lot of your memories, a lot of your needs. And it's doing that so that you can function in an everyday level. And we get really good at that in general life. We get really good at putting what we feel underneath the surface and aside so that we can get on with our tasks and our responsibilities and what we need to do. And very often when people start to feel their emotions bubbling up more and more and more, they're like, oh no, it's creeping up. I'm starting to suffer. What do I do? We get trained again to repress further, to get more engaged there. And we've even built a lot of our psychiatric systems on creating medications that will also repress all of those symptoms. So everything's get bottled up the whole time. And of course, what you have to recognize about emotions is they're not pathologies, they're not random. Your emotions very often are signal indicators of unmet needs. There are really important things going on in your life that you might not actually be meeting or dealing with effectively, and those emotions are there to signal that. The psychedelic, rather than suppressing those emotions, brings them all up. It says, cool, let's unveil it. Let's go explore my mind. Let me understand every need, every emotion. And in bubbling all of that up, it also takes away something that your frontal lobe often does. Your frontal lobe often only thinks about it in a single way. And when you have a psychedelic in your system, you're actually able to start having more mental flexibility. You can look at this problem or this belief you have about yourself that you always take for granted from different angles. And that often helps free people because you start to come out with a radically altered perspective. You know, so many people will take for granted this idea that they'll say, you know, I was never love worthy, and they've got a whole story for why that's the case. And when they ingested the psychedelic, they got to see memories of where they were loved, where someone did treasure them, and it starts to shake that a little bit. They also get insights into what they've really needed that they forgot about, that they've left behind, parts of themselves, old traumas, memories. And they come up with these realizations that, like, I need more of this in my life, or I need to be more grateful for that person, or I need to change this part of my life because it's not serving me. All of these insights are incredible, but insights without action aren't worth anything. You know, as Francois Borzat says, you can go in and have a psychedelic experience, you can have the beatific vision, but what's the point of the beatific vision if it's not going to change you enough to look the homeless person in the eye? So the idea is that you can have all of these insights, function number one, but function number two is where the rubber hits the road. A psychedelic tends to cause the release of another chemical in your brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. And BDNF is highly responsible for learning and behavioral change. So you can think of BDNF a lot like fertilizer on soil. We're going to spray fertilizer, like super potent fertilizer, all over your brain. And we're going to pair it with a whole bunch of magical insights for you. You're going to get to know yourself really, really well, and your brain is going to be hyper fertile for you to do new things. What you plant in that soil after a psychedelic experience will grow big, will grow strong, and will grow fast. So if you have all of these incredible insights, and after having these insights, you go back to all the same behaviors you were doing before, you're going to grow them bigger, stronger, and faster. Sometimes not only will you stay the same, you'll actually just get worse. But if you pair those insights with profound behavioral changes, which is often what the function of a therapist is. A function of a therapist is to say, cool, now that we know this about you, let's talk about different strategies by which you can do things differently. Because if we start behaving differently, we're going to grow different stuff in your brain. We're going to grow different pathways, different ways of being that are more congruent with what you really need in your life, that are better for you, and we're going to fulfill you at a deeper level. Because if your needs are better met, if you're more fulfilled, and you have the right behavioral strategies to do it, we're literally going to rewire your brain faster and allow you to change. And all those pesky emotions that are upsetting you, they're not going to surface as much, not because we've suppressed them, but because we dealt with the problem at the core. So the way I often summarize it for people is I say, in normal therapy, what you're often doing is if you think of your mind as a block of clay, you and your therapist are chipping away at the clay to mold it into the shape that you want. But that's long, it's hard, and it's laborious. A psychedelic serves to heat up that clay and makes your mind super malleable so that now when you do the same things, it molds faster and more cleanly than ever before. So people who take a psychedelic and then don't think they're going to have to do any of the integrative work afterwards, unfortunately have peak experiences and then crash back to an unwanted reality. But if they pair it with behavioral change, whether that's facilitated by a therapist, a shaman, a coach, a loved one, take your pick, as long as you learn to behave differently, then you've really gotten the message, and you've really started to use it. And what's cool about it is that this is also why people don't become dependent on psychedelics. Because Alan Watts has a wonderful phrase for this, where he says, the point of a psychedelic is that it's kind of like a phone that starts to ring. When the phone rings, pick it up and listen to the message and act on the message. But once you've got the message, hang up the phone. You don't need the message anymore. And that's why you'll often see when it's done really, really right, in my experience, someone will often have one or a few journeys and they just don't need psychedelics anymore. And not because they don't love them and they don't find the experience profound. They're just like, I don't need it anymore. Like, I got the message. I was ready to hang up the phone. And when it's done that way, we're cooperating with what it really gives you. And I think you're using it to its full potential then.
I think that's why it's very important to have especially if you're using the therapy kind of, you've got to have someone there that can guide you and someone that can kind of explain to you what's going on. So I wanted to go back. So we understand, and a lot of people understand the actual benefits of these things, of hallucinogenic substances. Okay. Especially LSD and mushrooms. I know LSD, if I can recall right, I think it was developed in the 1930s in Switzerland, if I remember correctly. I think it came around there. I know the Nazis used it during World War II. They were trying their experiments and all that kind of stuff. I know it was used in the US in the 50s and 60s to try and treat alcoholism, as you I think you might know well, and schizophrenia, actually, believe it or not. But then I think it was Ronald Reagan that actually started back in 1966. He actually said, no, it must be scheduled as a class 1 drug. And I think that's when all things, and I know there's a reason for that whole shift across, because this will be in another podcast which we'll chat about this, but this was the whole MK Ultra issue that went around. But it's from 1966. But my issue is, if you can see and you've got data like you have, you've got the proof, you've got the stats to show that you've got schizophrenia, you've got alcoholism, you've got this, you've got that. If I'm giving you this, I'm giving you that under the right conditions, it works. Why not go ahead and say, you know what, guys, as long as you're legal, or you've got a legal responsibility and you've signed legal documentation, you may use it under those circumstances. I don't understand why we're still living in that sense in the 1400s, where it's almost like a devil's calling, a devil's thing. Oh no, you mustn't touch that. That's like the worst thing ever. People don't understand it. So it's fascinating that we've come so far in our understanding especially on the natural, like the plants and the mushrooms and even LSD, which was synthesized. There's so much benefit to it and so much healing, which the people in this world need, but yet we're so far from understanding, and we're so far, we think that these things are just like the worst. You understand? So yeah, it's sad.
You're
actually.
right, Lee. It is a tragedy. And I think for many people, they would argue that one of the greatest tragedies of humanity for a long time has been that we entered into a phase, when you look at the bigger picture of things, where we started to treat the alteration of our consciousness for growth, whether spiritually or personally, as such a terrible thing. Because in the long history of humanity, this has been something that for the Greeks and the ancients and everybody else we knew was part of life. It was really, really important to ingest what they called entheogens, spirit molecules that grow us and help us. And it's absolutely terrible that we did it. And, there are many, many people who, once they delve into this from a scientific perspective, become very, very acutely aware of how silly it is. I mean, David Nutt is probably chief amongst them, where when he was studying this and he got placed on a parliamentary advisory committee for scheduling different addictive substances, he was horrified to see that the way they made those decisions was not based on any science. It was often based, unfortunately, on personal preference and, of course, political and financial agenda. And that remains one of the great misfortunes. One of my favorite things about psychedelics And one of the most beautiful things about them is whether they grow naturally or whether they're synthetic, I really appreciate that they have resisted commercialization. We are aware that unfortunately, and it's really not a shock or a surprise or a controversy to anyone, that big pharma is not thrilled about the existence of psychedelics. They don't like the idea of medicines existing because it threatens to topple a massive industry that many people have a vested interest in, which sadly is not always about wellness.
But the idea that sorry, I don't want to cut you off there, Anthony, but while you're on that topic, I've had this discussion with, actually not even a discussion. I've spoken about this topic and people, there's so much agreement around this. Big pharma, unfortunately, are not there to cure you. They're there to keep you medicated because they cannot, if they found a cure for cancer and they said to you, listen, you can go to the clinic next week, you can get a jab, your cancer's gone. Yes, initially they'd make a bundle because people with cancer would go and let's go. But thereafter, everything would collapse. They wouldn't be making money because they're now not spending money on the aftercare. They're spending money on the radiation. They're spending money on this. They're spending money on that. Every year you've got to go and do this. Every year you've got to do that. You've got to have these tablets. So by the end of your lifetime, you've spent about 2 million rand worth of medication. They can't do without that. So for me, unfortunately, this is my own opinion. Big Pharma is probably the biggest evil on this planet because they're just there to keep people under the thumb, make sure that they're medicating you. Don't worry about the healing. We're not there to heal you. We're just there to put the plaster on the wound. That's my point.
I mean, no, but exactly as you say, that's not the mentality we would want any healthcare system to run off on. And that's kind of what's special about these molecules. They are cheap, easily accessible, incredibly safe and tolerable with low addicting potentials. So like you said, I mean, we've seen in countries where we've decriminalized drugs, especially, I mean, Portugal is such a great example of that. We've seen what massive benefit that has created to people. It's been remarkably useful to them. And if these things exist in a way that's safe, it becomes so much more accessible to be able to use them as healing agents. But one of the coolest things about psychedelics that Ian McGilchrist, the neuroscientist from Oxford, reminds us of, is he says psychedelics are special because they are taking us back to an era of medicine, not medication. To your point, medications are things that you have to keep taking in order to be well. Psychedelics are medicines. They're a thing you're meant to take once or a few times, and then it catalyzes a healing process that means you don't need anything going forward. And that is something that makes them really, really special, but also makes them very, very dangerous in the wrong kind of people's eyes.
Yeah, I mean it's very lovely said there, Anthony. But I sometimes feel like I don't think I want everybody to take these things because like I think there's some people that I've seen that are a bit crazy and like if they take it, I don't know what they're going to be capable of. Because like when we were discussing like Lee, when we were discussing our LSD trips, because I took quite a bit of LSD before before rehab. And I explained, I think it was 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago, that I talked about my bad trips, like some of the bad, and I went on such a bad trip. I mean, I ran through this razor wire and I cut my leg up so badly. I had a 3-hour surgery on this leg, almost died like bleeding to death because we were going from one hospital and then the nurses kicked off and they all left me there and then I had to, and I'm doing this all like tripping. It was the most craziest experience ever. And then they did 3-hour surgery. And then the second time, I mean, my friends were like, really messing with me. Like I was just coming up on the LSD trip and they were messing with me and then they were coming to me with knives and like, because they could see I was getting freaked out and then they were pushing it because it was fun for them, as you say, like the LSD, because everything starts getting fun. Because I mean, I had some of the funnest times of my life on LSD and the most scariest times of my life. But so they started fucking with me with these knives and I went into such a state that I couldn't even look at anybody that looked at me. It was so scary. But I mean, if I had like a streak of me of like real like aggression or something, I probably would have killed somebody that night. I mean, I would have attacked. I mean, I would have, because everybody looked at me. Their face was so scary. It was like making shapes, and I was in the state of absolute fear. I mean, it could be very dangerous. I mean, you don't know what's because and obviously they go into that whole thing like anybody that's done any of this research that the setting plays such an important part that you have to be in a good setting with good people and good vibes because it'll amplify whatever's going on in that environment you're on. But that's why I think it is got to be taken so seriously, and it can't just be like I mean, if it does get legalized, it's not like everyone must just start taking these things because, like, I mean, you'll probably get some psychos that'll could go into like a school and mow down a whole bunch of people. So I mean, so that's what I'm saying. Like, as much as we're like all like praising and that, it can be very scary.
No, it absolutely could. You know what's interesting when you look at places where they've legalized things like this is that two things happen. One, if you look at Portugal, what was interesting about their case was that the people who created the parameters and the conditions for all of it were all medical doctors and psychologists. And I suppose that's where my sense of calm comes in for it, because I agree with you. I certainly wouldn't advocate for saying, cool, let's throw these things into the water supply for people and make them, something that everyone uses under any condition. The natural progression that we always follow is we first start with medicalization, because of course their greatest potential lies in healing and transformation, as far as we can tell. And what's great in that regard is I think that again, if you're left with ethical and compassionate people in the healthcare industry, which I think most of them are, you're left in a position where, as you say, people will attend to this in the right way, where you do think immediately that just like with anything else, you can't give them to everybody, and that's true for anything in the world, you know. So we know that for people who are in a manic episode, for people who have schizophrenia, for people who have a history of cardiac disease, psychedelics are not safe. You know, when you were saying, sure, some people could have like a really loosened and inhibition experience that could be really dangerous for them. And so Sam Harris puts it really nicely when he says, yes, there are some people for whom the string of sanity should not receive even the slightest tug, and who would be better suited to having the tray table of consciousness always closed and in the upright position at all times. Like, so absolutely true that you can't just give anybody psychedelics. But I suppose taken for granted amongst mental health professionals is we'd start off by saying, absolutely. We would only give it to certain people under certain conditions where it's really useful. And what's nice about that is what's meant to always happen thereafter is that with these kinds of things becoming accessible to people, the goal really is to educate them really, really well about this. Because the more people tend to know about these things very, very seriously, generally that translates into somewhat wiser decisions. You can't always guarantee it, but having something that's allowed to be regulated, where there's a lot of knowledge and accessible information and practitioners who are aware of it, ultimately seems to be a better course of action than having them accessible but not regulated and not spoken about, because then you kind of, you end up with the same thing with fewer recourses to be able to help people. I think one of the great mistakes to make is to think that, oh, if we legalize it, people will use it more. That's kind of never been the story of how drugs have worked around the world. It's never really been based on how legal it is. But what is cool is if we can get the right kind of people to know enough about them, we can do what we call in medicine a lot of harm reduction, to try and make sure the good side shines through a little bit better. Because the funny thing is, before Nixon's war on drugs, these things were like commonplace for people. And they were being used less prolifically or equal to, but certainly not more than. But they just didn't have as many scary, dark, horrible stories because there was enough knowledge, comfort, and responsibility around them to help. And so I guess the guys here is not so much whether someone will use it or not, but how much knowledge and comfort and education we can start safely giving people to make sure that the best versions of these come through.
Yeah. It's the same as the cannabis, the legalization of cannabis in South Africa. I know there's a bit of a hiccup a couple of weeks ago, but that's kind of been sorted out. But again, everybody thought, oh, geez, all the youth are now going to be smoking Zol, and it's going to be the worst thing. But nothing's changed. I mean, if anything, I haven't heard of anybody smoking cannabis. There's been no news articles say that because cannabis is now legalized, this has gone wrong, that's happened, this has happened. Nothing's happened. It's like we've adopted it into our norm, and we carry on. There's been no massive tragedies that have happened because it's now been legalized. If anything, I've heard some good stuff because the guys have got the CBD oils for the cancers, for those kind of things, and for your dog that's got cancer, they're giving them CBD oil. So I've heard good stuff. I haven't heard anything bad about it. So, it's like you said, as long as we can teach, show the people this is how it's meant to be, under right circumstances and right conditions, with the right people, whoever's in charge, I think it's a good thing to do. And I think these guys need to look at a way of, even for medical, just legalizing it for medical.
Sorry, Anthony, there's just one question that I want to ask before we go, but the pineal gland. Because like Rick Strassman, when he went into the DMT, his research, he was so adamant that it was to do with the pineal gland, and that's what he was trying to, because he thought that was the seat of the soul, and that's what it was accessing, and that's what makes DMT. And so, has there been people that have had like some brain surgery and they've taken the pineal gland out, and then is there been any surgery like that ever, and then seen what happens to that person?
Sure, there are people who've had that experience, and I mean, his concept of the pineal gland is a very old one in neuroscience. I mean, it was even as early as the Egyptians. They, for some reason, thought the pineal gland was the source of all consciousness as well, and it was really, really interesting. So we also used to think that the pineal gland is where dreams came from, and more, everyone's been disappointed because every time we give this thing a damn function and we go test it, we're like, oh, it doesn't do that either. So yes, people have had it removed. Remember, it's your major endocrine gland, so it's coordinating hormonal release. And so really what you see is that the person does have some endocrine anomalies more often than not, but that they're often treated through the other endocrine glands that start to take over, and you've got to coordinate it. But it's more to do with, as we said, like hormones. And it's not a strange thing to think about that, because it also helps with certain neurohormones, like neurotransmitters, like serotonin, etc. But it's not as heavily involved as we thought. What we have learned, however, that not far from the pineal gland, we have found the one center in the brain that is the seat of consciousness. Now, we don't mean that that's where consciousness comes from. We just mean that if that's there, you're conscious, and if that's there, it's not. And that's called the periaqueductal gray. The really, really tiny area that we've now, by virtue of further study, have seen. And what's intriguing about that is that if you destroy the periaqueductal gray, a person loses the capability to have conscious awareness of experiences, to attribute emotional qualities to experiences, like what's good, what's bad. They can't really tell anymore. And so there we've gotten a little bit of progress. But sadly, the pineal gland has always had the disappointing reputation of seemingly being super, super interesting. But sadly, the empirical data says that, listen, it's still cool, but it's not as cool as we thought.
Yeah, because that's
help with melatonin.
Yeah, because that's Rick Strassman's, like, all his research. I mean, also Joe Dispenza, he talks about the crystals on the pineal gland, and you got to do the Kundalini energy, and it ignites the crystals on the pineal gland, and then it acts like an antenna, and you can get the information from outside and whatever. And then so Rick Strassman, like, I mean, he's obviously way before Joe Dispenza, but like he's like going on, like, he's so obsessed that the DMT is doing something to the pineal gland, and it's activating the seed of your soul, which is also funny because then the other guy that came up with that book, and he became famous on Oprah Winfrey's thing, and he said, no, the seed of the soul is in the heart. But anyway, sorry, now back to the pineal gland. So so I'm reading this, and he's going on about the melatonin, because obviously it secretes melatonin, and it's supposed to be like responsible for your sleep patterns and your rhythms, and he's doing all these tests. He's doing blood tests, and he's giving people melatonin tablets, and he's trying all of these things. And I'm just like, dude, just go find someone that has this thing removed. Like, if there's somebody out there that has this thing removed, just take them, put them in the experiment, give them the DMT, and see what happens. But I don't think he ever did that. So have you known anybody without a pineal gland that's taken some mushrooms or DMT, LSD?
I don't think there's anybody
No.
without a pineal gland.
That's the next
So
documentary. That's what I'm doing in my next documentary.
that would be fascinating. And listen, the person who manages to get that study through an ethics committee deserves a Nobel Prize just for getting that study cleared. It would be utterly fascinating. I
So,
just think it would be really tough to get it through.
so
But yeah,
if there's anybody out there listening here that does not have a pineal gland that got it removed, please give me a call. We're gonna go smoke some DMT. We're gonna get
I
to the
don't think
bottom
you
of
can function without one, dude, to be honest.
No, but you can't. Anthony said you can.
No, but no. So no, what I'm so Anthony is like talking about the endocrine system, but what I'm saying, this kind of releases melatonin, helps with the sleep patterns. If you don't have your circadian rhythms, how are you going to sleep?
yeah. But just to give you guys context, forgive me for being a nerd, but it's a slight technicality. The pineal gland is partly responsible for the release of melatonin. Melatonin actually comes from your suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus. So
Those
it's
words.
another illustration of the pineal gland is not as central as you're
Not that
thinking. It's
interesting.
part of it, but it's not the whole story.
No, it's just like the what is this thing on your side here that they remove your
Oh, your
Appendix.
appendix.
it's the appendix in the head. It's your head
No,
appendix.
Shane, that would be an exaggeration. It's still good and it's more useful than an appendix. But you're in the right direction. It's not quite the heart, but I wouldn't quite call it the appendix.
Yeah, okay. No, cool,
Okay,
man.
cool. Anthony,
Anthony, thanks, man.
so much, man.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much. It was a wonderful time chatting with you guys.
Yeah, you too, man. Thank you for your time.
Awesome.
Thanks,
I'll send
Anthony.
you the link to the docu.
Yeah.
Yes, please, man. Have a good one, guys.
Cheers, cheers.
Okay, cool.
Cheers.
Cheers, man.
Cool, man. Very interesting.
Yeah, very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
so when you going to take your next mushroom?
Yeah, I'm going. It's giving me permission to take drugs.
Yeah. And under supervision, okay, well,
Yeah.
yeah. Make sure you're not in a bad space. Make sure you haven't had your
Your house.
ex-girlfriend yelling at you, then you're going to take a mushroom.
Dude, that's what I want to ask him. I forgot to ask him. I was like, no, because if you got the putty brain, he says you take it and then your brain comes like, well, I mean, like this sounds terrible.
It's like
your brain-
malleable. Yeah.
But it's like it becomes, well, there's a word for it, like the,
It's like reorganizing it.
yeah, whatever. But like, he says that if you go into the same patterns, but I'm sitting there thinking like, geez, what if you go back to your like abusive partner or your, I mean, psychologically or emotionally or physically, whatever, and then you're in that situation or you had this shitty job, and then that's like, I mean, what do you have to like take the mushrooms and then quit everything, tell the wife you're going to leave? So I wish I asked him that. But anyway.
Just take little microdoses of it daily.
No, but I did. I took
Like,
microdosing.
shit,
I did.
I know. Did you?
I did the microdosing for 6 months. And I
Yeah.
was terrified because I thought, geez, what if this stuff makes me high and I enjoy it? And it was like a proper, like, I don't know, it was mixed up by Shelley, the main person in my documentary, because she's a facilitator of this. So she gave me them and I took it for 6 months with lion's mane. And the proper microdose thing, and I didn't see any effect. I mean, I
Nothing
don't
at
know
all.
if it's like a toad in the water that you slowly boil it, and it actually doesn't. That's the story, and the toad actually doesn't know it's getting hot until it boils to death. I mean, maybe it was that, and I'm super enlightened now, but it took so long that I don't even know it.
Shit. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
But yeah, sweetly.
All right, lekker, buddy. Yeah, well, we'll chat to you guys next week. Thanks for listening in. If you got this far, please like and subscribe. It would be fantastic. Thank you to all our guys that have joined us over this last month. It's been 30 of you. Thank you. Much appreciated. Helps the channel grow. And yeah, I love you guys. Chat to you next week. Thanks, man. Cheers, Will.
Cheers, guys.